What if all of the air was suddenly replaced with cotton candy? Instead of oxygen, cotton candy. First it would be nice, but then you realize you've got cotton candy in your lungs, under your eyelids, in your heart valves, in your veins. I don't want cotton candy anymore. Call the police. The police are dead. Killed by cotton candy. I was never a fan of that 70s show. I found the humor generally unfunny, and the writing and direction were pretty poor. Yet, I was at a yard sale and saw a very strange VHS tape that said, "I died in the 1970s," written in Sharpie, among a package of baby wipes and expired chewing gum. I didn't know at the time there was probably a lost episode of that 70s show, but what transpired shortly after watching disturbed me in ways that I can't really describe. The episode was entitled "The Cass Gets Murdered," and it begins as any usual episode of the popular Fox TV program begins. One of the characters, the Indian man, remarks that someone was recently murdered and he was going to commit suicide as a result. There's no lead-up or further comment on this. It just happens. First, I thought something strange was going on with the audio on the VHS tape player. I just couldn't believe he'd say that. The audience was laughing. Just kidding, they weren't. It was dead silence. The camera immediately cuts to a cigar store Indian and a character screaming. It's so strange. Why would a cigar store Indian be there? Finally, we learn a bit about the plot. The characters are planning a house party and want to invite everyone on the block, but nobody is in any of the houses. At first, I was a bit confused. What did they mean no one was in the houses? They're all in the garage now, these teens from Point Place, Wisconsin. And Eric Foreman remarks that the pot brownies he ate earlier are making him feel like he's full of twinkling lights and shards of glass. Then Ashton Kutcher's character screams, "House party!" Starts dancing alone, like a faggot, while one of the characters, Mila Kunis, who voiced Meg on Family Guy, is crying in the background. That means cigarette. "How'd he get in here?" "It was Stephen Hyde, the guy with the long hair and glasses." You know, that one. Didn't take too long for me to realize they were talking about the cigar store Indian. "It's the 70s, right?" Bob Pinciotti, fat man in his 40s with an afro, was dressed like a teen and attempting to participate in the house party. "How do you do, fellow kids?" Keeps insisting it's a party and demands everybody dance. Eric Foreman picked up a map of Wisconsin and indicated Point Place as an actual location on the map. Then Bob Pinciotti grabs Donna Pinciotti's breast and starts trying to have sex with her. He starts going on a rant about tantric sex, and I shut the tape off. More like that 70s no. When I turned it back on, the garage was on fire. The audience was laughing at the breast grabbing, and after some brief Googling, I found out that was his teenage daughter. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is playing very loudly in the background, to the point that I thought my older vintage bubble TV speakers were going to shatter. I find it hard to believe the Beatles estate would authorize their music on this disturbing unreleased VHS tape. Then again, it might have just been Oasis. One of the characters starts roasting marshmallows and the audience laughs, but you also hear some mumbling. Fire appears to be contained, but this was no campfire. Their lives were at risk. Bob Pinciotti starts taking off his clothes, and he turns the cigar store Indian around. Evidently, they'd purchased it to liven up the house party, whatever the fuck that meant. One of the characters lights up what is clearly a joint and puts it in his mouth of the cigar store Indian, murmuring something about an ancient spell. One of the characters takes out a punch bowl and offers the group an ice-cold glass of fruit punch. A wax replica of Richard Nixon's head is seen melting in the background, largely due to the fire. Eric Foreman quickly indicates that the clocks are not ticking because time itself has stopped. He demonstrates this by installing new batteries in 2 factory-conditioned clocks and showing that the arms refuse to move. Cool party trick. It was Kelso, the douchebag, played by popular actor Ashton Kutcher. Watch this! He takes out the lighter and lights his own hair on fire and starts screaming as it spreads to the rest of his skin. The actor starts crying as blistered burns begin to envelope his face. Blood pours down the pus-filled wounds. He finally douses the fire by pouring fruit punch on it. Part of his scalp is missing. He lights up what is clearly marijuana and begins to smoke it. That would explain a lot. Another character screams, and the cigar store Indian's hand is now outstretched, holding a rock with googly eyes on it. The Indian is wearing stylized comedic sunglasses, and its position is shifted 45 degrees in between jump cuts. Then one of the characters is shown holding a cell phone. This didn't make any sense. This was supposed to be the 1970s. They're all high now, both the adults and children. Smoking, gonna take all their clothes off and engage in an orgy in the garage. I guess this was supposed to be funny, but Kitty Foreman's shriveled breasts were not censored, and I found it disturbing for a family program that aired on Fox. Plus, her son was right there. Now, this was disturbing. Eric Foreman is shown using a Pong machine to try to access some sort of makeshift internet device in vain. The 70s was a specific era in time, he said. 1970 to 1979. After that, clothing styles changed and new technology developed. Bob Pinciotti picked up a knife and attempted to slice Eric's lips off. He shoved him back and he started laughing as he had stabbed himself in the process, and Bob laid there naked, bleeding, laughing for a good 5 minutes without the camera cutting to anything else. Eric, covered in his blood, holds up a news article stating that 6 teens died in a garage fire in 1974 while abusing lysergic acid diethylamide, enough to tranquilize a horse. But the pictures are of different teens. He tries to put the fire out with his shoe while Ashton Kutcher cuts off the tip of his nose. Different teens. The characters keep commenting about how this is a wild party, while visible lacerations appear between cuts on their necks, shoulders, arms. Now it becomes apparent, through a quick jump cut, of course, that the garage door is closed and the camera is now uncomfortably close to their faces. Eric Foreman appeared slightly disheveled now. At least in my eyes, he seemed older and more grizzled, like he was 37. He says this is all a lie and indicates that either this is not the 70s or not teenagers, or this is not Point Place, Wisconsin, like I give a fuck. He's not sure whether they're alive or dead, but the marijuana was not there for fun. In fact, the characters were getting more hysterical, some of them puking, others bleeding from the lacerations. Kelso, who's again played by Ashton Kutcher, had used a piece of broken mirror to cut off the nerves connecting his spine to his brainstem. He laughed a lot and slumped over dead. His limbs turned to jello. There was a permanent smile on his face. The fire continued to spread, and the cigar store Indian is now shown both burning and smoking a cigar. They're screaming now, like screeches of pain in between the forced laughter. The audience laugh track now intermittently erupting because they're not real people but a soundboard. Eric Foreman says, "This isn't a party." There's a long pause, and then he says, "It's a ceremony." The entire cast and crew are killed, completely nude, many cut into pieces, engulfed by the flames. The fire truck is shown outside, but nobody gets out to stop the fire. The camera shows the garage door opener was outside of the garage. The 1970s asbestos insulation clearly visible, along with camera cuts showing that the other door leading out of garage was clearly stuffed with useless trinkets like an old canoe, pong machines, a souvenir cigar store Indian blocking the doorway. Smoke made this less visible as a screen cutaway. Instead of the normal cut using smiley face buttons, the faces were frowning. And so was I. So was I. There was this thing they did on that 70s show where they'd all be in a circle and the camera would spin 360 degrees as each character is shown smoking what is presumed to be marijuana. Either that or participating in a circle jerk. But now the camera just showed the cigar store Indian at the table, and as the camera spun around, there was nobody else there. I neglected to mention that one character was not participating in the orgy party, and that was the father, retired factory worker Red Foreman. Instead, let me tell you. Indeed, he opened the garage door to find bloody, charred skeletons, some pieces of the burnt flesh still attached. Melted plastic sunglasses, torn, bloody pieces of clothing clinging to rib cages that contained sticky ash-like substance of burned flesh. Many of the skeletons were twisted and contorted. One with an afro was shown gasping while clutching a burnt can of Old Milwaukee. Some still have their eyes, though the flesh around them is completely charred. Pieces of the skull are visible, portions of the ash breaking arms and heads off as he slogged through the pile of still warm dead bodies. He looks more angry than anything else and shoves what is clearly the contorted skeleton remains of his son away, to find a melted plastic clock making a low ticking noise under the sound of sizzling among the sight of horrified, burned faces locked in permanent, terrified expressions. Nothing to see there. He looks up at something on the roof and makes a very angry face. "You took the batteries out of the fire alarm, dumbass!" The audience laughed, but it sounded like they were very far away and at a distance. The screen faded to black.